Hi, thanks for joining us for this brief Rhetorica conversation about communication and messaging. It's my great privilege to have Berni Dymet with us today. Berni is a graduate of RMC, or the Royal Military College, Duntroon. Back in the early 80s, Berni built an IT company to well over 50 consultants and worked around the world and was eventually snatched up by a multinational public company. Since about 2004, Berni has been a not-for-profit broadcaster, and now, is it fair to say, Berni, you took that organisation from a struggling state to a situation now where you're reaching more than 1,000 radio stations in 160 countries and an audience, a weekly listening audience of about 15 million people? Is that right, Berni?
Yeah, that's right. It's been an interesting journey.
Well, that's a great achievement, Berni, and I really appreciate you spending these few minutes with us today.
That's right.
Berni, you're also a guy. I see you as somebody who has great practical experience and intelligence, and you're a person who gets things done. You expressed an interest in talking about messaging, and perhaps an area or an aspect of messaging that sometimes or often overlooked. Tell us about that. Maybe just kick us off with your explanation of what you think messaging is.
Yeah, see, often we put together a communication piece. It might be a letter, it might be an e-news, it might be a marketing lunch, it might be a television interview, whatever it is. We put that together, and people spend so much time on the physical things. I remember speaking at a fundraising lunch for a not-for-profit in Queensland, and I'm not knocking the Queenslanders, but they went to so much trouble. It was a fabulous lunch. They got 150 people in the room, wow. And as the lunch rolled out, I thought, there's no central theme here. There's no central message here. What are they having this lunch for, and what's the point of what are they trying to communicate? And I guess so often we forget the communication piece. We forget the message that we're trying to get across because we're so focused on all the other stuff that goes around putting the message together.
Okay, it kind of surprises me to hear you say that, because in communication training sessions very often, one of the first things people say to me, apart from I'm great with my hands, is I always yeah. And of course we then fail to see any movement from the hands whatsoever, or hands that aren't connected with the message, etc. But the second thing that people often say is, well, I always prepare. And so that surprises me that the message does not come through, because you'd expect that that's what preparation is going to.
Look, I see it all the time. I see people put out a letter, put out an e-news, and there's 5 components for me. I want to keep this really simple. Okay. The first component is, what is the central message that I want to get across? Yep. When they've read the piece, when they've watched the interview, when they've gone home from the lunch, whatever we're doing, what's the one thing that I want them to remember? And I always start with that. When I'm dealing with clients or doing my own stuff, I always start with what's the one thing. So then when I'm putting everything together, I keep coming back to what's that one thing that I want to get across.
That's great, Berni. I want to hear the other 4. Can I ask you a question about that one thing? How specific? What advice would you give to people about the expression of that one thing? Does it need to have a particular length? Does it need to be, what's in your mind about that one thing? One of the things I wonder is, does it need to, how do people need to be able to then repeat that thing, or is it enough for people just to remember it?
I'd like them to be able to tell it to someone else. I'd like them to know it so well that they can actually do the on-selling for me to someone else. And so I always try and come up with a short but compelling value proposition that people can't help but walk past. I don't mean to be glib, I don't mean to be trite, yep. but people confuse the most simple of marketing messages, because let's face it, we're all busy, we're all being bombarded with stuff, yep. And unless it's a simple, powerful, compelling value proposition, they're not going to remember it. And so I always try and come up with a compelling value proposition. Let me give you the for instance of this fundraiser I went to for this not-for-profit in Queensland. The obvious value proposition for them was to say, this is what we do, this is what the impact of our organisation has on people's lives. Here are some examples of that impact. If you get behind us and support us, you will be generating this sort of impact in the community. It's pretty simple, right? Okay. But it's just amazing how often people miss it.
Okay. Well, what are the next items on your list of 5 things?
Okay, so the first one is the simple, straightforward, what's the message, what do I want them to remember? Yep. The second thing is the context. Everybody that we're communicating with almost exclusively is busy. Everyone has been bombarded with messages. And we kind of sit here and we communicate from outside of the dung heap. We think it's about us. We think they want to know about us. Yep. Shocking though it may seem, they're not sitting there waiting for me to send them an email. They're not sitting there waiting for me to invite them to a lunch. I need to do something that grabs their attention. I need to do something that stands out from all the noise and all the marketing messages that they're being bombarded with. So I need to begin by saying what's in their world, what's their world about, what do they need, rather than thinking it's about me talking about me. Because if it's me talking about me, there's plenty of other Joes out there that want to do that, and it's simply not going to cut the mustard. So the second thing is, the context is they're busy. Yep. The context is they're not sitting waiting for us to do stuff. Their world does not revolve around what we do, it revolves around what they do. So we now need to communicate on their terms, and that's my third point. We need to communicate on their terms by using their buying language. Let me give you an example. I was doing some work with a beauty therapist organisation, Art Market. They do Hollywood A-list stars, and we were sitting there, and I was saying, who are your customers? And they said, oh, well, Hollywood A-list stars. And I said, yeah, but that's not all of them. Who are your main customers? Right. And they sat and thought about it for a while, and they are able to say our main customers are busy professionals who work hard and have plenty of disposable income. Okay. Well, that's an important thing for me to understand, that that's the context that I'm speaking into. Yep. Then I said, why do they come to your business? Why do they come for a massage or a facial or a manicure to your business? And they sat and thought about it, and they said, oh, it's because we do such a great job. And I said, there's lots of other people that do a great job. What are they actually buying when they come to you? And they thought about it, and they said, you know what they're buying? They're buying a reward. They work hard, they're stressed people, and they come to have a massage to kind of reward themselves. Yes. So all of a sudden we discovered the way in to communicate with these people on their terms using their buying language. I think it's a really important thing.
Yeah, great. So that's the third out of the 5. The fourth?
The fourth one is that if we want to get a response out of them, we need to demonstrably add value to their lives. And so I come back to the beauty therapist organisation again. We began sending out fortnightly e-newsers or e-signs which added value to their lives, which told people what were the upcoming colours in the new fashions, what happens in winter and how can you avoid colds. And so we started adding value into their lives and then encouraging them to come and reward themselves. And the results, let me tell you, for an organisation that had never done any marketing, were truly astounding, because we were speaking directly into what they wanted to buy.
That's really the key there, isn't it? I know I have found it difficult in some contexts to pump out a newsletter, for example, because because there's an underlying knowledge that, hang on, this is really about me trying to push something rather than creating value for my audience. That's got to be the key, isn't it? I mean, a lot of push marketing really struggles for that very reason.
And let's consider what we're doing here in this video. You've gone to the trouble to call me, to organise, to shoot this interview. You've put it up on your website. Why have you done that? The answer is clearly to add value to the lives of your customers and potential customers. And can I tell you what happens when you do that? They respond and go, here's someone who's added value to my life. This makes sense to me. I need some help. Gee, who am I going to go and buy that help from? It's not rocket science. It's really quite simple.
You're revealing all my tricks, Bernie.
Look, I'm sorry. Do we want to cut that and do it again? I mean, come on, it's really simple. Yeah. I discovered this when I had an IT consultancy, and I started speaking at conferences. Now, fortunately, I happen to be a reasonable communicator, but I openly and brazenly shared my intellectual property. I told people the mistakes that we'd made, the difficult things on the last IT projects that we'd done, and you know what? People so appreciated it.
Yeah.
My average was one new job out of each conference I spoke at, simply because I added value to people's lives.
Yeah.
It wasn't something I planned on doing. We just did it, and it happened, and we stumbled on it, and we realised this is how it works.
Yeah, well done. And that leads us to the 5th point.
The 5th point is knowing exactly what action or response you want out of these people.
Okay.
Let's say I'm having a lunch, or let's say I'm sending out an e-newser. What response, what action step do you want? The not-for-profit fundraiser that I went to speak at, the obvious action step is you want people to give money to the not-for-profit organisation. But again, it surprises me how many e-newses or e-signs I get or how many letters I get where there is not a clear ask or a clear action step or a clear response step. If you don't give me the opportunity to respond, if you don't ask me and give me the opportunity, chances are I'm not going to respond.
Okay. How just finally, Bernie, how succinctly, how subtly, or how clearly, or how much sophistication do people need to ask that question with in there? And does it need to? And is it a closer, if you like? Does it always have to be positioned at the end?
No, not necessarily, and it's going to vary depending on what your message is and what your aim is.
Okay.
Your aim may just be to build your brand. Right? If that's your aim, then the closer is going to be different to if you're deliberately wanting to sell the latest massage therapy at the beauty therapist. Right? They're two different. So it's contextual. It's horses for courses.
Yeah.
But if your aim in putting a marketing piece together or doing an interview is to get something across, and that involves an action step or an action response, then that action response must be explicit. Obviously, the wording is important. You don't want to be brazen. You don't want to be culturally insensitive. But it has to be explicit, because if it's not, people are going to miss it.
Okay. Terrific, Bernie. If we could summarise the 5, can we do that just in a
Sure, we
word
can.
or two?
The first one is knowing what the message is, being very clear about a succinct value proposition.
Yep.
The second is understanding the context where they're busy and they're not waiting for you, and you need to do something or say something to grab their attention. Thirdly is determining their buying language and communicating with them on their terms about their needs rather than communicating on our terms about what we want. The fourth is adding value to their lives very clearly, and the fifth is having a clear, demonstrable action or response step.
Bernie, that was terrific. Thank you very much. 5 simple, practical, portable, very portable ideas, tips, techniques to communicate well in any context, by the sound of it.
Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, well done, Bernie. Anything else you'd like to add as we close or before we close?
No, look, none of this is rocket science. The big issue is taking a step out of our context and putting ourselves in the shoes of the people that we're trying to communicate with and trying to look back at what we're doing through their eyes. I think that's the biggest mistake I see time and time again. People communicate from where they're at rather than into the context of the people they're trying to communicate with.
Terrific. Hey, Bernie, thanks so much for taking the time to chat today and answer those questions, present those very practical tips for us. Always great speaking with you, and I hope to talk again soon.
Been a pleasure. Thanks, Anthony.